Hello everyone, I'm Ubaid Ahmed and this is the first video of security testing series. In this video, I'm going to cover some of the basic terms and terminologies related to security testing. There are going to be multiple videos in which we are going to cover the different tools, the techniques, the phases of security testing, how to use those tools, and pretty much a lot of things. So if you follow the entire series, then I'm sure that I'm confident enough that you will have enough knowledge and enough skill to start doing security testing for your individual projects, or even you can do bug bounty and stuff like that. So without further delay, let's get started. So starting with a basic question, what is security testing? So security testing is a process to determine that the application which you are testing or the system which you are testing protects the data which it is dealing with, and also it maintains the functionality. So whatever application you are testing or what application is uh, under the assessment, and you are performing security testing on it, that application, that system must be handling the data in a way that no unauthorized person can access it. There's no cross-site scripting attack, there's no SQL injection. So all those things are performed in the security testing. And also we find out whether there is any information leakage. For example, if you are storing uh, your email ID, your phone number, or any PII in an application, and somehow that application is leaking that data. For example, there is a particular URL which is not available on the UI, but if you do the fuzzing is the like process of finding out the hidden URLs. Okay, you keep on passing the values to the end of URL, and it like you start getting results for it, and you can find out the hidden URLs. So by the method of fuzzing, if that particular URL is discovered and it is disclosing all the PII of all the users who have stored their data on the application, so there's information leakage. This type of issue is known as the sensitive information disclosure. So you have to ensure that nothing like this is happening in the application, and also to check the application for any unauthorized access. So whatever application which you are testing, there might be different roles. There will be there can be a admin role, there can be a user role. So you have to ensure that the lower privilege user is not able to perform the actions of a higher privilege user, or any user who is not authenticated into the application, or who have not purchased the premium membership is not able to perform the tasks of a premium member. So all these things are also ensured in the security testing. Okay, this not only answers what is security testing, but also did covered the purpose of security testing. So there are different other things as well why we perform security testing. So actually, like you can say many reasons are there for performing security testing, but the primary purpose of security testing is to identify the loopholes or the weaknesses present in the application, and also remediating them. So, okay, the loopholes, the weaknesses, the like whatever, if they are present in an application, it is known as a vulnerability. So the primary purpose is to find those vulnerabilities and subsequently repair them. Now it helps in improving the current system. Okay, if you are finding a vulnerability and remediating them, then you are improving whatever system is there in existence. Okay, and if those vulnerabilities are fixed and system is improved, definitely the durability of the system will increase and it will work for longer time. Okay. The security testing helps in finding out the loophole that can cause loss of important information. As I just gave you an example of that particular URL which was leaking out the PII of users. Also, there can be an issue where an attacker somehow gains an access and is able to execute SQL queries, and they delete the entire database. Okay, so there will be a loss of important information. So you can also find out those loopholes or those vulnerabilities and fix them. Now these are some of the basic security terms. Okay, We are going to cover these terms and with examples, okay, how you look for them in a particular application, what are the things that you perform to look for these things or these terms in an application. For example, the first term is the authentication. Authentication is basically a system is asking you who are you, and it is trying to verify the user identity. Now consider a building, okay, which has a lock on the main gate, and only those people who have the key to open that lock can enter into that building. So that's authentication. Now there are different types of authentication. We have single factor authentication, we have two factor authentication, and multi-factor authentication. Single factor authentication is when you need only your credentials, or you just require a pin. For example, you have your pattern or your pin on your phones. You like enter the pattern or you enter the pin and you can use that phone. You enter your email ID or you enter your password and you can use that application. So that's the single factor authentication. But if we add another layer of security, then after entering your username, password, you will be getting an OTP, probably on your email or on your registered mobile number, and you will have to enter that OTP in order to use that application. So that's the two-factor authentication. Now there can be another layer of authentication, which is known as the multi-factor authentication, where you will be entering the credentials, you will be entering your OTP, but there's another layer of security, and you might be asked to enter a code from the authenticator app. So that's the multi-factor authentication. Now we have authorization. So there are two terms, authentication and authorization. They are often confused, but you must not confuse them. Okay, authentication is different, authorization is different. Authorization is basically application is trying to determine what are the permissions that the particular user have. Okay, basically it's trying to ask you what are you allowed to do. Now going to back that building example, you unlocked and entered into that building. Now there are multiple floors, and on each floor there are separate rooms, and each user have designated rooms where they can enter, and they cannot enter in any other room. So basically that's the authorization, and authorization is decided by the access control list, which tells you, okay, the user A will be able to enter into the room 123, user B will be able to enter into the room 456, and user C can enter any room they want. Okay, so that's the authorization. Now there are different types of authorization. Like authorization types, we have API keys, we have basic auth, HMAC, and OAuth. Okay, confidentiality, basically if two people are chatting with each other, Bob and Lily are chatting with each other. Bob sends a message to Lily. Lily responds to that message. Now they both believe that whatever they're talking about or whatever their interaction is, it's confidential among them. However, there's a hacker who is intercepting their messages and reading all their chats. So there's no confidentiality. Okay, we have to ensure while security testing that there must be confidentiality and there's no breach of confidentiality, and your information is protected from unauthorized access. Okay, so we when we talk about confidentiality, we talk about there must not be any unauthorized access or unauthorized use of information. There must not be any sensitive data disclosure or sensitive information disclosure. Okay, and okay, sometimes what happens, that's this is very interesting example. While security testing one of the application, what I observed was that I was just entering my mobile number for receiving the OTP, and on the UI the message displayed was, we have sent an OTP on your registered mobile number. That's fine, that's totally okay. However, when I checked the API request and response, in the API response they were actually disclosing the OTP which they were sending. So by exploiting this particular vulnerability, I could have logged in into any user's account. Okay, so we should like avoid exposing unnecessary information in API response. I mean developers often believe that since a normal user won't have access to the API response, they will just see whatever is displayed on the UI. So they some like sometimes like recklessly like display the entire class which they have fetched, and it might contain sensitive information like OTP. So we must avoid doing those things. Integrity. Okay, is your data accurate? The data which you have received, is it accurate? For example, person A sends a message that send me 1,000 to this account number 1234562 to person B. However, there is a hacker sitting in between who is not only intercepting their message but also modifying them. Hacker received this message, send me 1,000 to this account 123456, and modified it and sent it to the person B. Now the message reads, send me 10,000 to this number 456789. Okay, so there is no integrity. The person A is believing they have sent a message to person B, and person B believes the message which they have received has come from person A. Okay, but actually that did not happen. The message was modified in between. So there was breach of integrity. Okay, and this is what we look for while testing for integrity, that we have to prevent data from being modified or misused by an unauthorized party. Okay, so there must the data which the person is receiving must be accurate and complete, and there must not be any alteration of data during storage, in process, or during transmission. Non-repudiation. So repudiate means to deny something. Okay, and non-repudiation, when we talk about non-repudiation in an application, so it's an assurance that an individual cannot deny an action because the system provides proof of action. Okay, if you are using an application, then your each and every action is being logged, and if you do something wrong, it will also get logged. So once you get caught, you cannot deny of not performing that action because it is already logged. Like we have your like if we talk about in financial terms, then we have signed bank deals, and when you transfer cash to someone, a proper uh, logging of that thing is there. So someone just cannot simply deny, okay, I have not received the amount which you transferred. Okay, you have your like reference ID via which it can not only be found out the amount you sent, but also it will also give the proof that that particular amount was actually transferred to the person's account. So that's non-repudiation. Vulnerability, payload, and exploit. So vulnerability, payload, and exploit are the mostly used terms when we talk about security testing or bug bounty. One vulnerability which we have already like covered, it's a weakness or loophole present in the application. Okay, and a payload is the malicious action that the attacker performs in order to exploit the vulnerability. That is, in order to take the advantage of that vulnerability or the weakness or the loophole present in the application. For example, having a lock which is not strong is a vulnerability. Hammer is the payload. Hitting the hammer on the lock in order to break it, you are exploiting the vulnerability, the weakness of that lock, you're exploiting it. So that's the most easy example which I can give you to make you understand these three terms. CVE is the common vulnerabilities and exposures. So what happens is there are certain list publicly disclosed like security flaws, CV, and each such flaw has a unique ID which is known as the CVE ID, and it is when a vulnerability is found in the product like Adobe or Microsoft or iOS. So a CV is assigned to such security flaws, and the security advisory is issued by the vendors and researchers regarding that CVE or regarding that vulnerability? What are the steps that you must take in order to prevent yourself or in order to protect yourself from that particular vulnerability or from the harms of that particular vulnerability? For example, recently there was this log4j vulnerability. So the CVE of log4j is CVE 2021 4428 Okay, now we have CVSS. CVSS is the Common Vulnerabilities Scoring System. You are doing security testing for an application. You found out the vulnerability, and according to you, it's high. But when you share the report with the client says it's not high, it's low vulnerability. Now, how are you going to resolve this dispute? The client will stick to their stand that it's low vulnerability, and you will stick to your stand that it's a high vulnerability. How are you going to prove who is wrong and who is right? So for that we have a CVSS calculator. Okay, and there are different factors using which the vulnerability or the severity of a particular vulnerability is decided. Okay, let me show you the CVSS calculator. So this is the CVSS calculator. Okay, I'll share the link of this particular calculator in the description below. Here we have different factors. Okay, we have the attack vector, whether the this attack can be carried out on the network, or you have to be in the adjacent network or on the local network, or you need to have a physical access to the device. So let's say I'll select network, and what is the attack complexity? Is it low or is it high? Does it require many steps and like complicated things? Okay, so it's the attack complexity is very low, and privilege is required. The privileges required can be whether you need to have some access to the application, or you need to have any access to the application irrespective of the role, or you need to be a high privilege user. So this decided by these three things. I'll say I need to have any access to the application, like even a low privilege access. And whether the user interaction, here the user interaction means the victim. Do you like require the victim to take some action, or like the attack can be carried out without any action from them? So I say none, action is not required. Scope, and once you perform this particular attack, the scope, does the scope get changed? Okay, does it that happen that a lower privilege user will become a high privilege user? Is it so? Then we will say change. If it is not happening, then we'll say the scope remains unchanged. What is the confidentiality leakage or the breach in the confidentiality? Is it none, or is it low? Is it high? Depending upon how much information you are getting your hands on. I say the confidentiality is high. Integrity, okay, the modification and of data while storing or in process. So we have to decide using these three things. Suppose the integrity is low, there's not much impact on the data that is being stored, or the data that is being transmitted. And availability, whether the application remains available or does it becomes unavailable to all the users, or like a group of users. So I say there is no impact on the availability. Now, based on these factors, I have got that the severity of this particular vulnerability, it's a high severity vulnerability. Okay, now I just need to share this particular thing, vector string. If you see over here, I just need to share it with the client. Okay, see, these are the steps which I'm performing, and based on the, based on the CVSS calculator, the severity is high, so there's no dispute. Okay, they'll have to agree to it. So vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Okay, often it's confused that VAPT, or vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, is the same thing. However, these are the two different things. We have vulnerability assessment, that is the assessment of an application to find out the vulnerabilities or loopholes or the weaknesses. And then there comes the penetration testing. Now, based on the weaknesses that we have found, we make use of certain tools and manual techniques to exploit those vulnerabilities. We just try to penetrate the defenses which is already present in the application. If we can break those defenses and cause havoc into the application, so this is the penetration testing. Now once we have performed the VA and PT part, comes the reporting part where we share the POC. We tell the client, or we share the report where we tell, okay, this is the description of this particular vulnerability that we have found and the risk of this vulnerability, and this is the uh, POC of whatever we have found and how we can remediate it. So these are all part of reporting in VAPT. So with this we have come to the end of the first video. In the coming videos, we are going to cover a lot more things like phases of security testing, the tools, the techniques that we use in each of the phase of security testing, and some of the common vulnerabilities, how to find them, and a lot more. So make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. In this way, you will get the notification whenever a new video comes up. So thank you, goodbye, and happy learning.